It's the last Q&A session of 2023, and I've got a lot of questions, including one about a new decoder connection that has come out that I want to talk about. Hey everybody, my name is Jimmy. Welcome to Coffee and Trains. Today I am drinking some Starbucks Holiday Blend just because it's kind of near Christmas when I am recording this video. If you want to tell me what kind of coffee you are drinking and have it featured just like these guys right here, you can do that in the comments below, and who knows, you might see your comment on an episode of Coffee and Trains. Also, this is a Q&A, and I answer questions that you guys have put in the comments of last month's Q&A. So if you want your question answered in next month's Q&A, which will be the first one of 2024, you can put that in the comments below and you might see it there. Cheers. Our first question comes from John Redfern Jr. 8363, and he asks about boosters on my layout and when would you need them and when would you need to incorporate them. He says that he'll be running about 100 feet of track with 3 engines simultaneously, and he has a Digitrax Zephyr DC S52 controller. So basically the thing with boosters is, yes, there is some loss of power as you get longer and longer track, but the main thing that you need to consider is how many locomotives you need to run simultaneously, and you need to look at what their max amperage draw is. When you're looking at boosters, you're looking at amps. So I figure usually it's about a ½ amp to an amp, depending on what scale you're running, what locomotive, if it has sound or anything like that, but usually about a ½ amp to an amp per locomotive at full blast. And what you really need to look at is how many locomotives you'll be running at full blast. You know, I have up to 5 amps on mine because sometimes I do run quite a few locomotives, but that's a bit overkill on mine. But again, that's not a booster. Really, what you can do is have booster districts. Let's say if your layout is in more than one room, just have a booster district for each layout. But really, boosters come down to how many trains you intend to run. But if you have different power districts, I typically like having a booster on each power district. Tom the Train Guy asks, that it says he is working on an HO scale layout, and what track brand do I recommend? Well, it depends. If you are doing some sort of, if you want pre-attached row bed, I think that HO scale Kato Unitrack is great. It's also Code 83, which looks a bit more realistic. If you're looking just for your standard track, I've always used Atlas. It's really good. Pico is also really good. That's PECO. There's 2 Picos. There's PIKO and PECO. So pre-attached row bed, I'll always recommend Kato, and if you're looking for regular track, Atlas or Pico is going to do you just fine. Bob Cole 6779 asks how I'm mounting my Arduinos for setup, especially the switches. Now, I've actually done a couple videos on those, and I'm going to link one of those, just a general way that I make an Arduino board in a really simple way with just some wood and some hot glue that I can mount onto. It's actually mounted right under here, right here, and I'll link that video at the end. But basically, I just usually typically mount the boards onto, just with some hot glue, onto a piece of wood or something like that, or maybe I'll use some screws if I'm really feeling ambitious, and then I'll just stick them right up underneath and screw the wood board that they're on onto the bottom of the layout. And I will link that video at the end of this video. More Sandwich asks if there is any tips on sound for DC layouts. Now, this is really kind of a complicated question because typically sound isn't in the domain of DC except for in larger scales, especially when you think about like G scale and things like that. But if you look at locomotives that can operate in dual modes that come with sound, for example Broadway Limited, you can have sounds coming to that running out on a DC layout. Now, you're not going to have as much control over it as you would DCC, but doing sound on DC, you can really just have sound locomotives like Broadway Limited locomotives that have that sound, and they'll just pump it out when you're controlling it. Another option is, if you are really interested in this, if you look at something like Soundtrack's Blue Nami, those can run on DC layouts. They really just need a steady power supply, so you would just crank it up and then you would use your Bluetooth controller for a locomotive. So it's DC, but technically not. You can run it DCC or DC, but just directly from your phone via Bluetooth, as long as it has power, which can be supplied by a DC layout. Danomite 490 asks, when I do an op session, where do my passing freight trains go while I'm switching? Do they come off the layout, or is there hidden staging? Well, There was an intention to put some hidden staging and actually some forward staging on my layout. That's what those little turnouts to nowhere, if you've noticed them on my layout, were supposed to go to, but I never got around to that. So really, I just have a cart that holds all of my stuff as I'm working, doing an op session, and really I'll just gently remove it once it's reached a certain point, and I will take it off and put it onto that cart for holding it. And that's pretty much how I do it. A little bit of camera magic there. But no, I do not have hidden staging on this layout. My next layout, though, I'm planning on a little bit of it. Gary Cooper 9574 asked me if I've heard any updates on the EX motor shield that I spoke about in my video about a month ago. And what he's talking about is the new EX motor shield 8874. And what that is basically it's a new custom motor shield designed specifically for DCC EX setups. And I actually just looked on the website right before answering this question, and it looks like it's still out of stock for the US suppliers. I'll link everything so you can keep an eye on it, but the best thing I would say to do is to keep an eye on the DCC EX website. They'll probably have some announcements, but also keep an eye on that listing as well. So that's what I would say for that, but just keep an eye on that. They're really trying to get the manufacturing going on this, but any wait list you can join that'll get it announced, I would join that as well. While PT Models asked me, said I mentioned Bachmann and Kato, NCE, and says that I haven't talked about ESU. He says that they use ESU and find it fantastic and it's simple to use, and ask if I do have something against ESU. No, I do not have something against ESU. A couple things is just personal preference for me. For non-sound, as long as it's not Next 18, I have always just slapped a Digitrax decoder. They're very affordable, especially for Kato locomotives. For Next 18, NCE makes a nice non-sound decoder that I've put in several locomotives, and they work great. And I know that ESU has Next 18. I'm actually going to talk about them here in a minute. And for sound, I honestly just prefer Soundtrax. I really like their decoders. Are pretty easy to use. Don't need any special software or anything like that. Everything, as long as you buy the correct sound profile for your locomotive, it's very easy to set up and use. Nothing against ESU. I know a ton of people that love them. I think I have one locomotive that came with ESU pre-installed. But yeah, it's just a personal preference thing. I like Digitrax, I like NCE, and I like Soundtrax, but I'll probably get some ESU decoders in at some point, which I'll actually probably talk about here in a few minutes. Aetherbound asks, is there a good video for someone that knows how to get DCC on Kato in-scale Unitrack? Tried looking for tutorials and haven't found many. Well, first of all, I did kind of a tutorial on DCC for Kato Unitrack with my MRR1 build. I'll link that video at the end. And also a great resource is Mike Pfeiffer. He does a ton of videos, and he has a bunch on doing stuff with Kato Unitrack, including DCC stuff. So definitely check him out. I'll link his channel right up here. Richard Nelson asked, what are the advantages of DCC compared to DC? He said all of his trains are mostly DC. It says HO scale or Tycho Mantua with some Atlas and Bachmann. And Walters, he says, basically he's looking for the advantages of DCC. Well, there's a couple of them. One is when you have multiple trains running, it's a lot easier to control multiple trains. You don't have to have different power districts with different throttles or anything like that. And that also makes wiring a lot simpler with that. You're also talking about more fine control of locomotives in terms of you're going to have constant power going to the track versus varying the voltage with DC. So these are the things. But if you're also talking about Tycho and Mantua, and if these are older Bachmanns, one thing you have to consider, though, if you are considering converting these from DC to DCC, is that older locomotives needed more power, so more amps basically. You're looking at probably like the 2 amp range, 1 to 2 amp range, somewhere around there, versus a lot less with modern locomotives. So if you're converting those from DC to DCC, you may need to repower them and put new motors in them. So that's definitely something to consider if you're converting from DC to DCC, looking at what type of decoder you would want to get. Andy Crawford says that they are considering installing a roundhouse turntable, and must it be electrically isolated or using an auto reverser? And this is something you really just have to decide the way that you would run it. The simplest way to be would just be to have a couple of switches that you can throw and change what the polarity is and change which wire goes to which side, because what basically happens is when you have a turntable, it's going to spin, and then the wires are going to be could be in opposite directions of what the rest of the track is, and you could cause a short circuit. So the simplest way to do this would be just to have a manual throw that you could throw and reverse which way the wires are going depending on the orientation of this. I've never seen this done with a turntable, but I have seen this done with a Y reverse setup, where the train would pull, they had a switch that threw the power, and then they would throw the switch that would reverse the wiring, and then they would turn the power back on and it would run just fine. So that's probably the simplest way. An auto reverser is going to do the same thing, where it's going to basically pick up that short circuit, and it's going to be able to change the polarity to match. So, but that's the way that I would do a turntable, is just having that manual switch, because you're not going to have the train driving on the turntable. Once it gets on there, you can cut the power, align it, and then flip the switch and have it drive right back off. That's the simplest way to do it, in my opinion. Michael Amoroso 4561 says that he's going to be building his model railroad switching layout in his garage, and he lives in New Jersey, and was thinking of using Kato Unitrack. Would this limit the expansion and contraction of the track, and would it be better than Atlas FlexTrack? So what you really need to consider when you're building a layout, especially in a garage, is you're going to have temperature changes and even humidity changes that are going to cause your materials to expand and contract. And usually you have to afford some sort of expansion and contraction spaces that will allow your track to move a little bit and everything like that. Now, one thing, I have built Kato Unitrack in garages. I built it in regular houses and all this kind of stuff, and I've never had a serious expansion and contraction issue, and that's just because of the plastic road bed. I could just be lucky, but I live in North Carolina, so I get some pretty hot summers, but I also get some pretty cold temperatures in the winter. So I have a wide variety of temperatures, and I've never had a serious issue with a layout in the garage for Kato Unitrack. So you're probably going to go a little bit better with Kato Unitrack in terms of expansion and contraction. But if you like Atlas FlexTrack, you can go with that. You just need to make sure you have those expansion and contraction joints in there. Weird Tuja asks, where is the Christmas layout content? Well, I just built that. This question was asked before I built that little micro layout, and here it is. It's actually my first Z-scale layout, and it's a really cool thing. I've got all the parts linked at that video. You can check that out there. Eric Bryan 6911 says that he recently purchased his first starter set and was wondering what you'd recommend for track cleaning. The simplest thing that I can recommend before you really get into stuff is just what's called a Bright Boy. I believe it's from Walthers, and these are basically just almost like an eraser for track, and it's basically just a great little thing that you can just, if you have a dirty spot, you can just clean it right off with that. Bright Boys, they've been around forever, really great for cleaning track. If you're looking for something a bit more permanent as you get bigger, I'm going to link this video right up here to Ron's Trains and Things and his no-ox solution. A bunch of people have done that, so definitely check that out. The Astroneer asks, he's looking to get into DCC, and he wants to set up an Arduino with DCC EX and a JMRI as an interface. He says if he gets Digitrack sound decoders, can he load custom sounds on it with this system? Well, I think I've actually tried, but I could never get it to work. But Digitrax has their own program. It's called Sound Loader, and then they have the Sound Depot that you can load on there. So now, one thing to note, it is PC only. There is no Mac application, so it's kind of why I don't do it, because I have a Mac for video editing and all that kind of stuff. But if you have a PC, you can use Digitrack's Sound Loader program and their Sound Depot, and that is all on their website. Christian E069 made a comment about scale trains and their new decoder mount in their in-scale locomotives. Now, what's basically happening is, up until now, scale trains used Next 18 decoder mounts, and they're switching over to what is called the E24 mount. It is a new mount from ESU. No other companies make a decoder mount for this, and as of right now, there's only one decoder that can go in that, and that is the ESU Loksound 5 Nano, and what that is, let me get the part number, make sure I get that right, which is 58925. Now, that's a sound decoder, and that's the only one you can get right now, and it's about $100. But there is a LokPilot version coming out with that ESU E24 mount. Let me get the part number. It's 59925, and basically the reason behind this is that you're going to get more connections from the decoder to the locomotives, the E24, and what it uses, it basically uses the J3200 mount, which was actually originally came out with the iPhone 6. It was a while back, and it's going to allow for a smaller, narrower decoder, which is going to fit better in scale narrow-body locomotives. Think the SD40-2, and it's going to be able to give you more functionality. So right now, it's kind of annoying because the only decoder available, and it's really hard to find anyways, is that Loksound decoder at $100. But that LokPilot decoder, which is the non-sound version, is coming, which I'm really happy about because the next locomotive I have coming in is the Scale Train C39-8, and that has the E24 mount. So I'm going to have to be a little bit patient and wait on that LokPilot decoder because I had no intention of putting sound in it. But it's a little annoying right now, but it's new technology, it's coming out, and hopefully, since it's not a proprietary mount, it's just a different type of connector, the J3200, that other manufacturers will be able to come out with this. So that's everything that's going on with this. I think Scale Trains, I think Atlas, and there may be one other that has that's using this new mount in their in-scale locomotives, but that's everything that's going on with it. I'll talk about it more when that C39 comes in. It should be in the next couple of days, and I'll probably have a review out in January. But that is what is going on with this new ESU E24 mount. If you have a question or a comment that you would like to ask for next month's Q&A, you can put that in the comments below. I love getting questions from you guys, and I love answering your questions. This is a lot of fun to me. So thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Jerry from the DIY and Digital. Stay safe, be kind, drink some coffee, and happy railroading.